Does the mention of OKRs make you break into a cold sweat, or does it energize you with a sense of purpose? Whether you're nodding in recognition or maybe scratching your head wondering what these OKR things even are, you're about to discover how this powerful framework can transform your work life. In this episode, we'll cut through the confusion and show you exactly how to turn objectives and key results from a maybe dreaded management mandate into your secret weapon for driving success. Miss this episode, and you risk continuing to struggle with misaligned priorities, unclear metrics, and the frustration of not seeing how your work impacts the bigger picture. With us is a true OKR expert, Ben Lamorte. Ben has done more OKR coaching than anyone else. He has more experience at this. Consequently, he has become the coach to OKR coaches. He has also helped business leaders and organizations to define and make measurable progress on their most important goals, guiding more than 100 organizations in deploying OKRs. He is the founder of OKRs.com that provides resources and coaching services. He's also co-authored Objectives and Key Results, Driving Focus, Alignment, and Engagement, and more recently authored the OKRs Field Book. If you're listening to us and you want to watch the video version of our discussion, simply go to our new YouTube channel. You'll find that by searching for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in and learn how to make OKRs work for you and not against you.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hey, listen, Chad, I'm so great to be here with somebody who actually did a PhD. I was a PhD dropout from Stanford. I never quite made it as far as you did, so congratulations on that.
Well, you got the mechanical engineering thing and you made it into Stanford and had good reasons for moving on. You're like one of these guys that goes to Harvard and does the startup thing. You went to Stanford and decided to help the world with OKRs.
Right. I'm not a billionaire, but I'm making enough so I can get by. Let's just put it that way.
We all have a path, right? And you really have done. I read the history. It was quite inspiring about your journey on OKRs, how you dove into this thing that you realized would be helpful to people at a time when not everyone was listening, and you gave away a lot of your time doing it, and now people come to you because you are the world's expert, truly. You have more experience in this than anyone at this point.
Yeah, I really lucked out because in the beginning of my career, I was doing OKRs coaching before OKRs really became more of a mainstream term. And so I was doing education, right? Trying to convince people to do this. And that's really not a recipe for success. But by actually doing it for free, I was able to demonstrate value. And ultimately, people started bringing me in to be their OKRs coach.
Yep, absolutely. So let's get some context. A lot of people have heard the term. Not everyone has used this yet. Just kind of that 30,000-foot version on why should we use these, and basically what does that look like if we do use them?
Sure. I mean, OKRs, right? Objectives and key results. It really comes out of Intel in the 1970s, 1980s. There's some controversy exactly when that happened. But let's just say Andy Grove is the sort of godfather of OKRs. And he really takes this MBO concept and pretty much relabels it as OKRs. The difference is OKRs are not tied to your bonus, whereas MBOs often are. And objectives and key results does a really good job. Look, Andy Grove was a mathematician. So he saw some of these MBOs like be nicer on the phone or return calls faster or something like that. And other ones were increase the time that it takes to do the project or decrease, let's say, from 1 hour to half an hour or whatever. So they had really measurable statements. So he decoupled the objective from the key results, right? So then we have this broad objective statement, the sort of, hey, this is what we're going to try to improve right now. And then we have these key results, usually 2, 3, or 4, maybe 5 key results, which are measurable statements that let us know how we can tell that we've achieved the objective. And those are like those mathematical measurable statements, as opposed to just like be nicer on the phone or optimize something like that.
Okay. So we got the kind of gist there. I don't know how fast you can do the structure for us in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just gave you some historical context, but what happened was, look, these guys at Intel, back when Intel really was, I'm telling you, like, it's my stock in Intel is not doing as good as it used to, right? But back then, these guys really had their act together. And they use this model of OKRs, objectives and key results, to really get clear on what is the most important area for us to focus so that we're all aligned and working toward the same goal. Now, what was so cool about OKRs was that it evolved, right? So Oracle started using OKRs, eventually Google starts using OKRs, and they're using it as a language, a way of talking about goals where everybody's speaking the same language about what is the most important thing to achieve. And we're asking a certain set of questions. So you're asking questions like, what is the most important area to focus, right? That's the objective. How will we know we've achieved it? That's the key result. How confident are we that we're going to achieve the key result? And I should point out also that there was rapid cycles. So things are changing. In fact, at Intel, they had 2-month cycles for their OKRs. So think of this as opposed to annual goal setting, right? They may have had something like that as well. But these OKR cycles were just 2 months. So you say, we're going to focus on this. We're going to have this product make this improvement in the next 2 months. Did we achieve it or not? We're going to have a demo ready by this date. It's going to have this many visitors or whatever. Boom, throw that out, start again, another 2 months. So it's a very agile model of thinking about goal setting. And I would say now people find that OKRs are sort of spread a little bit like wildfires because once you're doing it right, it actually is the exact communication that leadership wants, the way that they want to hear you talk is in this language of OKRs. I'll give you a quick story that'll give you the sort of the benefit of OKRs from my perspective. What happened to me, I was lucky enough to meet this guy, Jeff Walker. He was the founder of Oracle Applications. So if you can go back to Oracle, like Larry Ellison, right, $20 million company at the time, hardware. Well, guess what? Larry Ellison brings in Jeff Walker. Jeff Walker is Oracle Applications, building out Oracle financials, et cetera. Hey, 7 years later, we got a $1 billion company. And if you read the history, you'll see that actually Oracle is really more of a software company than a hardware company. And that's all because of Jeff Walker, who to some extent, Jeff, if you're listening, I want you to know that we really appreciate you. This guy is a guru. He became my mentor, and he would ask me questions because I was a guy that would ramble, probably like I'm doing now. And in executive meetings, the tolerance was pretty low for that, right? You have to get to the point, right? And what happened was when I would talk at executive meetings, it wouldn't go like that. I would be all rambled out. We got the webinar coming up. We got this happening. We're operating on all cylinders. We're really busy. It's great. The sales reps are knocking it out of the park. And Jeff would pause and say, Ben, let me ask you a question. When you go on a hike, do you have a destination? Now, at the time, I had small kids. So I would say, well, I kind of have a general area where we're hiking. We might see a waterfall or whatever. He said, Ben, if I ask you about your personal life, I'm glad to hear about the waterfall or your kids, right? But at work, if you don't have a clear destination, I don't even know why you're here. You have all these people working for you. You're working with these people, and you don't even know your destination. And I said, well, Jeff, so what do I do? He was a nice guy. He was my coach. So he said, you start by saying, here's where we want to be. You pause. You tell me this is the objective. You tell me here are the key results, right? Here's how we're going to measure our progress. Then you tell me where we are toward getting there. And now you can talk to me about, we got these webinars, we got these new product features that we're working on. You can talk to me about that in the context of this higher level OKR, which really serves as a bridge, right? Most companies have strategic plans, let's say 5 years out. Maybe they have annual budgets a year out, and maybe they have agile sprints 2 weeks out, right? But what about that quarterly or sort of 6-month project plan where we're going to not just say, here's a roadmap of the things we're going to get done, but here are the outcomes, the measurable outcomes we're going to create that we can point to as tangible indicators of success. And that's really where OKRs comes into play. So that's really how I got into it. And I just started I kind of channeled Jeff Walker's coaching and I just sort of started doing it. And it became the most valuable thing that I could find that I've ever done in my career.
And apparently a lot of companies have agreed since you have helped so many of them implement OKRs.
Yes.
I want to talk about the other side of this. Now that many listeners have some experience with OKRs, this will be new to some, but there are certainly people who have tried using OKRs, maybe for a few quarters, a couple of years, and they just really don't like it. And I want to know, what do you see as the reasons why that happens? Why do people reach that place like, this isn't great, or even stop using them?
I think and look, I always love to do this publicly and make these comments about the book, Measure What Matters. So what happened was pre-Measure What Matters, most organizations that used OKRs, in my experience, were doing a pretty good job. I mean, there were some failures, but for the most part, it was organically developing and the OKR systems were in pretty good shape. The 2018 thing, which is the book, Measure What Matters by the legendary Silicon Valley VC, John Doerr, who was the famous guy because he invested in Google first with like $10 million. And you can just figure out what that's worth now, right? He's doing okay. So he wrote a book called Measure What Matters, which is all about, basically it's a sales pitch for you should do OKRs, right? It should be called Measure What Matters, you should do OKRs, here's why. But he's mentioning people like Bono, Gates, Bill Gates, Al Gore, right? So there's some big time people in here. And they're talking about how they're using OKRs to change the world and all of that. This book becomes so popular that after 2018, I'm getting so many more calls from people wanting to do OKRs. And usually it's, hey, my leadership team read this book, Measure What Matters. We want to get OKRs done right away. Can you help us? And I'd be like, well, okay, but wait a minute. Why do you want to do OKRs? Well, our leadership team read the book. I know, but what is the problem we're trying to solve with OKRs? I don't know. They just said do it, right? So the very first thing that went wrong, really it wasn't just 2018, 2019, 2020, even then, going for a few years after that, was that people were doing OKRs just simply because they read a book. And that's not a good enough reason to implement a goal-setting system, across your company. I read a book and it's really cool. You should do it. I will say, if you do read Measure What Matters, you will probably say, oh my God, we should do this now, because it is a really good sales book on you should do OKRs. Fine print, only problem is it doesn't give you any idea at all how to do it. So you have all these people around the world, right? Because it's been translated all these different languages. Their boss is telling them, you need to implement OKRs. And like, okay, I'll try to do it. Like, I have no idea how to do it. So I'm just going to try to make it up and fly by the seat of my pants and see what happens. And so that's why so many people failed at the highest level. Now I'm dealing with so many organizations that are calling me up and saying, Ben, we need help. We tried to do OKRs. It really went bad. And I really would like to get into those reasons. If you want me, I'm going to start articulating a whole bunch of reasons. It's not just...
Let's do it.
Yeah. So first of all, the number one problem, if we were playing Family Feud, I mean, it would be ding, 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 right? It'll come up at the very top. Too many OKRs, right? So OKRs are supposed to help you focus on the most important things to make progress. But so many organizations were treating OKRs like, let's just use this as a way of like defining all the work we're going to do, right? Checking boxes of OKRs and making progress. And that gets me to my second one, which is making OKRs, key results that just look like tasks, like update the blog, launch this product feature, right? All of those things, none of those types of things are key results. Those are actions or initiatives or things that you can do. Key results are trying to say, okay, if you do it, so what? How do we know it was good? If you update the website or update the blog, that actually could be a bad thing. So I don't think of that as progress, right? So we have to ask ourselves, what is the measurable outcome we're trying to make? Are we trying to get more people to sign up for the demo? Are we trying, well, we can measure that. 200 people sign up for the demo from this blog post. Ooh, now we're talking about more of an outcome that's measurable. Right, a result. So that's the number two. Keep me honest on this. Number three will be accountability. Again, I don't want to point fingers, but why not? John Doerr doesn't care. He's got so much money, he doesn't care what I think about it. But I think in the book, Measure What Matters, he makes the claim that you need one name, so help me God, next to each key result, because OKRs are going to drive accountability. And listen, his logic is flawless. I love what he has to say about that. I'm doing OKRs with so many organizations, okay, Mr. Doerr, right? That in the real world, what I'm finding is, in many cases, that's absolutely wrong. So the people have read the book and they're doing one name, and then they call me up and they say, Ben, we're having real problems with cross-functional alignment. We're working in silos. And you put my name on that key result, and that person's name happens to be from, let's say, marketing, and they have a key result that's really dependent on, let's just say, IT, their internal IT team, and they're sort of blocked. What happens is if you put two names on that key result, one from one department, one from another, you can actually create cross-functional alignment. And we've seen this, I'm kind of getting to the solution, but we've seen that be an effective way for dealing with that. That was number three, one name next to your key result. I should actually say number four, nobody's name next to the key result. In my earlier career, I would see like, here are the OKRs, and then in the middle of the cycle, they would say, how are we doing? And they all look around, and it would I guess the team leader is going to be doing the talking, right? Who knows, right? Who's on point? So definitely you do need a name next to that key result. The other one that I've seen kind of blow this thing apart is every key result is written as a commit level, right? So in the book, Measure What Matters, if you see that, you'll see there's a commit key result and there's a stretch key result, often called a rooftop, right? Like a commit, like I can touch my roof. I can actually do that right now. Or a moonshot, which would be like, wouldn't it be amazing if this happened? And it probably won't. And what happens is in practice, most teams simply just make lists of commits. So they're not very comfortable writing these stretch key results. And so they're just basically getting this done. And it's expected that you'll achieve all your key results. In other words, they're not stretching themselves far enough. And my favorite part is at the end of the cycle, I say, wait, how come you didn't achieve that key result? And they said, oh, well, that was a real stretch. Well, but you didn't specify that in the beginning. So how are we supposed to know? Well, it's a good point, they would usually say. I said, well, if you're going to do the commit and the stretch model, how about for each objective, you say, I need one stretch key result for each objective and some commits, or we come up with some basic rules there. The other problem is we tie it to the bonus. I don't see this so much anymore, but there was a time when so many organizations were using OKRs actually to determine their bonus systems or their performance reviews, which really, again, is just not a good approach. It frees you from thinking big and you get into more of those commits and so forth. The other one that drives me nuts is what I call the direct cascade. Here's where you have an objective for the company, and the company then sets key results below that define achievement of that objective. I'm doing a lot of visuals here, so I'm glad. If you can't see this, imagine a hierarchy with an objective at the top, key results below. But then what happens is the key result, like for one of those key results of the company, a department says, oh, I'm going to sign up for that one and make that be my objective. In other words, my thinking as a department is limited to the key results that have been selected by the company, and I adopt that key result as my objective, which, by the way, is a violation of the very definition of what an objective is. Key results, I mean, they're different. So that's kind of a oops right there. But it ends up creating a copy and paste mentality and doesn't allow people to think for themselves, which is really the whole point. The definition of OKRs that I've created is really, it's a critical thinking framework, meaning you're asking questions. I won't give you the whole definition, but it starts with a critical thinking framework, meaning you're asking questions. You're not just simply copying and pasting from higher levels. And there's more bottom-up input, right? We need middle management to be really part of the development of these OKRs. And then the other one would be failing to define why the objective is important and why it is important right now. So people write the objective, optimize regression testing. Again, true story here. That was the objective. Optimize regression testing. It was the QA team. And then they said, and the key results are this and that, but then they said, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute. Why is that objective important? And they said, well, that's just what we do. And I said, oh, wait. Okay, that's not what OKRs. OKRs aren't just, that's just what we do. The objective is, where do we want to focus on making improvement, right? Why is it important to improve this regression testing? Oh, no, we're doing fine on that. It's not, we don't need to improve that. Oh, we just need to maintain that. That's more like just keep doing it. I'm like, oh, okay, well then that's not an objective. And they were like, oh, well, but that's what we do. I said, okay, that's great that that's what you do. I'm trying to say, where do we really want to improve? Where do we want to move the needle? And they said, well, after about 10 minutes, it became pretty clear. And usually it gets emotional. They were talking about, we need to work better with the engineers. That's the problem. And I said, well, okay, then that's your objective. But because they had all these reasons why it's important. The engineers are giving us this feedback that we're working on the wrong things. It's taking too long to get the tier A or whatever they were called priorities done. So I said, okay, that's your objective. And this gets to the next point. Now that we know why it's important, how are we going to make measurable progress? Guess what? Let's bring some of the engineers into this room right now. And let's define how they're going to measure progress, because we need to work with them. So this is me just sort of telling you, if you just do the objectives and then you write the key results, it may be that the objective isn't even an important objective. It is true that if you achieve those key results, you'll achieve that objective, but you're missing why, right? So we now require that why and why now are part of the objective and key results process, not just objective and key results, but rather objective. Why is this objective important and why now, right? And now key results. So that's a big one. And then the final one that I have two. Compliance. So if HR, but you know who you are. If you're telling people these teams have to get their OKRs done by this time and every team has to have OKRs and blah, 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 good luck. This should not be a compliance system. It starts to sound a little bit too much like a performance management system where you're just doing things because you're being told. And then the final one is levels. So having too many levels of OKRs, and specifically the individual person level. This is really where OKRs just makes no sense to me. Actually, Google recommended initially that you set OKRs at the company, team, and individual level. They did come back and retract that and say, absolutely do not set OKRs at the individual person level. That's just something we happen to do at Google, but we would never recommend anybody else do that. Because once you do that, your OKRs process just goes, it's like, it's wild. I mean, you just have, and there's a famous story at Twitter where almost all the individuals in some of these departments achieved their OKRs, but none of the teams achieved their OKRs, right? And if you look at the CEO doesn't care about the individual level OKRs. The CEO cares about the team level OKRs. And it's just human nature to work on I want to look good, so I'll do, if I have individual OKRs, that's obviously a higher priority than my team. Who cares about my team? I'll blame the others. I'm going to get mine done. And so that created the wrong incentive. So for all of those reasons, I mean, and by the way, I've just given you a massive tirade of so many reasons how and why these OKRs programs can go wrong, that if you're listening to this and your OKRs program went poorly, I would say, yeah, I would say that's true for probably the majority of organizations that launched OKRs after 2018. I'd say about 2/3 of those organizations have this kind of negative experience with OKRs. And so that's bad, right? We want to make it be a good experience. And so there's hope, right? There's still hope that OKRs can be good. But one of the things that's really important coming out of this is slow down, right? Don't just, your boss says do OKRs, don't just start rolling it out, getting everybody to write OKRs as fast as you can without being thoughtful about why are we doing this, getting those, what is the problem we're trying to solve? That's the fundamental thing.
You mentioned something that I haven't ever made a connection to because no one's ever made me think about it. So I appreciate this about MBOs, these management business objectives, really as kind of the precursor. And I remember an organization
Yeah.
that had an MBO direction, and some of the things that you listed as failures is why a lot of people moved away from MBOs, right? This issue that they were
Yes.
tied to bonuses.
Yes.
They created misalignment between functions, they caused functions to kind of war in silos against each other instead of creating alignment across their organization. And the levels were off at times. And so OKRs gives us a way, I think, to decouple that objective and the results and be more focused on the things that we care about, not just moving towards a bonus system that's kind of tied in.
Yes, and on that note, like one of the fundamental philosophies of OKRs that I left out is that this should be transparent, right? If you're doing MBOs where it's between you and your boss, like this is how I'm going to get my bonus if I can achieve X or whatever, you're not going to broadcast that throughout the organization.
Right.
But with OKRs, it's sort of the whole point is to make it transparent and broadcast it against the organization. And in the early days, it's one of my favorite stories from John Doerr. He actually had startup companies that would literally write their OKRs in the bathroom, like above the urinal. So that's so transparent that even people that don't work in the company, people that are just delivering mail or whatever, using the bathroom, right? They're going to know the company's OKRs. And this was sort of taking it to a new extreme as far as transparency. Most organizations that do OKRs don't quite go that far.
Right,
But the spirit of it is, yeah, exactly.
I love that. Okay, so you hit on, I mean, it's the opposite of a lot of the things you've shared for failures are what we should do instead. But what are some specifics that you would want us to focus on and make sure we're keeping in mind? Being transparent, certainly important.
Yeah.
I'm a little curious specifically about, you talked about levels a little bit, and also time durations. For a long time, a quarterly system was used,
Yeah.
and some organizations were running into like, we have so much other stuff we do every quarter that we have to prepare for. This feels like an added burden. Any other specifics about if you feel hindered, think about this?
Yeah, you nailed it. And I think really you do have to think about this. And I mean, my word for this is what I call deployment parameters. Okay. Again, as an engineering guy, I have these sort of technical terms, but the famous story that I have in my book, right? This is the OKRs field book, so I'm going to just have to hold it up in this context. Here it is. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. It's probably reversed.
Fantastic.
There it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
looks good. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And the OKRs field book, I wasn't always a good OKRs coach. Let me be honest. My first time I went to France for an OKRs project, it was a complete disaster. And when I got there, I was bombarded. I was supposed to do a training workshop. They called me in and said, let's launch OKRs. Ben, you're really good. You do the training workshop. I said, okay, great. I got there, and these French tech people, they were smart, okay? And they were just, I said, you can ask questions along the way. It was like everybody had their hand up, like right from the start. I'm like, oh God, firing squad here. And it was like, wait, how can we use OKRs if this isn't going to be tied to our compensation? Well, then how can you can tell me that's our most important goals. My compensation is what's going to be most important to me. But now you're telling me we have this whole other thing. And I'm like, oh God, that's kind of a good point. Well, let me see. Hey, you're telling me we're not supposed to cascade the goals. Well, then if we're not going to cascade the goals, how do we know they're aligned? I mean, you're telling me that we're just going to make them up and then there's no alignment. So what are we going to do there? And then I'm like, oh, actually, that's a good point. And wait a minute. So it was like, I didn't have what's called the deployment parameters. Back to your point about 3 months, 6 months, like what is the right cycle? I mean, Intel had the 2-month cycle. Almost nobody does that now. I have a couple clients that have done that. But the default in Measure What Matters is quarterly. And what we found pretty recently is that didn't work for a lot of organizations. Quarterly, we already have so many things going on quarterly anyway, right? We have to close the books. We got to hit our sales targets for the quarter, whatever. So do we really want to reset our OKRs also using that same cadence? I mean, it's just more work. So a lot of organizations have switched to 4-month cycles, right? So look, we find one planning cycle for OKRs in a year, definitely not enough. I mean, very few organizations do that. There are a couple, right? But I'm not going to get into it. It's very unusual. It's like a boundary condition. 6 months, pretty common. Turns out like banks and some of these industries where things aren't moving super quickly, it just makes sense to set OKRs every 6 months. And that's 2 cycles in a year. So from going from 1 cycle to 2 cycles in a year, I mean, I would say almost always, if not always, it's beneficial. Going from 2 cycles to 3 cycles, meaning every 4 months, if you were to divide it up evenly, is also almost always beneficial. I would say very often it's beneficial. Going from 3 cycles to 4 cycles, what we're finding is it's actually very unusual for that to be beneficial. So the idea of defaulting with a 3-month cycle, it turns out is a pretty big mistake that a lot of organizations are making. Now, that one thing that we're talking about, like what is the duration of my OKR cycle, like how often do I set my OKRs, throw them out and start over? That's one of these so-called deployment parameters. And the deployment parameters are the things, the questions that we must have answers to, okay, before we show up in France and do the OKRs workshop training. You need to know these answers. And if you don't, guess what? The firing squad's going to get you. And if they don't get you, don't worry, it'll get you eventually, and you're going to fail. So what I learned, this was my flight back from France, I was writing in my journal, look, it was bad. I got to admit, I was not in a good mood. But rather than just sitting there going, wow, this really sucks, I started thinking, I'm a pretty smart guy. I mean, look, they flew me out there and it was bad. I should be able to figure out why it was bad and how can I do better next time, right? That's usually what we do as humans, right? We say, that didn't work so well. How can it be better? And I went through it. There was a lot, right? That's why I just told you a lot of reasons why we fail. What we need to do with our clients is answer, there's about 10 of these questions, right? That we have to have clear answers to. And usually the CEO has to stamp off on that before we do the training workshop. So my big advice to you, if you're doing OKRs or about to do OKRs, is to go over each of these deployment parameters and really align. And you can always change them later, but really align on what are the answers to these questions so that we're all on the same page and have an explanation as to why we chose the way that we're doing it when we're first getting started. Okay, so that's the number one kind of thing that we need to start with before we roll out OKRs.
Okay, and because we won't have time to go through the 10, are those 10 in your OKRs fieldbook?
Oh yeah, of course, right? I've got those all in there. That's that's all in chapter 3, which by the way is pretty much half of the book, right? I mean, because if you don't get these deployment parameters right, what I found is you're in trouble. Like I said, if your OKRs program isn't going right, well, okay, then we can tweak a deployment parameter or make an adjustment, right? If we're setting OKRs too far down the organization, let's change the level at which we set it and bring it up. And that actually will then maybe solve that problem. If not, maybe we try something else. Maybe we're writing too many commit key results, right? Okay, well, let's not make those anymore. Instead, let's write every key result as a target level where it's 50-50, right? So we're expected to achieve half of our key results. So we're going to make them a little bit harder. And that's maybe an adjustment that we need to make. So all of those types of questions need to be in play because you're not going to get it right. Like anything, you're not going to get it right in the first cycle. So you're going to have to iterate. Usually it's the third or fourth cycle where you start to see it really start to sing.
Okay, so very helpful resource. I'm curious if everyone should be checking out the book because there's a lot more good details in there. But do you happen to have a resource somewhere on the web that talks about these deployment parameters?
I do. I think it's like if you go to OKRs.com, in fact, I'm just going to quickly check this. If you go to OKRs.com and you click on, I probably have it sort of hidden, 2-cycle remote coaching underneath the coaching menu. Yeah, you go to OKRs.com, coaching dropdown, click on 2-cycle remote coaching. And this actually gets you a 1 million foot version of the OKRs fieldbook. And it walks you through all the deployment parameters. Yeah.
Great. That's a wonderful resource for our listeners. Glad you have that available. Otherwise, we have to be talking about how can we get that available.
Right. I mean, come on. If this is really the most important thing you need to do before you roll out OKRs, here's a hint to myself. Put it on the website, right? I mean, you got to have it.
Yep, really good. Okay, so deployment parameters, very important. Being transparent. You have one more thing you would want to share before I move us on to another topic here?
Well, I have this thing called the 5 mantras for success. So I'm not going to give you all 5 because spoiler alert, it'll just be boring, but I'm going to give you 3, right? Less is more, right? You know where that's coming from. Have a smaller set of OKRs. Crawl, walk, run, which is a great change management philosophy, which is, hey, start your OKRs program like with one level, like maybe just the company level or just a department level or whatever, right? A product squad. Just do one, get it right, and then we worry about expanding it. And then the other one is outcomes, not output. We really do need to ask that question. And the magic question is, what is the intended outcome of the task? It's such a simple question, right? We're going to launch the blog. Okay, what is the intended outcome of launching the blog? How will we know it's successful? That one question goes a long way. So I covered 3 of the mantras. And we'll leave the others in case you want to read about them in the book.
It's a cliffhanger. Yep. So
yeah, can't wait.
That's good. I wonder if you have a success story to share and if you have one of kind of a turnaround, right? Someone that wasn't doing well, that'd be great. But anything that comes to mind that might help us just get our hands around.
I mean, I have so many success stories, but I'm going to tell you one that I think is kind of fun. It was early in my career, and these guys were a trading card group. Like I don't remember the exact name of the company, but it was something around trading cards. And what they would enable you to do is, let's say you had, and I'm talking like Magic the Gathering, not just baseball cards, but cards that I don't even know anything about. These cards that other people, Pokemon cards, okay? Yep. Cards like that. So it turns out they found out that there was a pretty untapped market for these things that was universal. So they created like a special online store where you could put all your cards on there and it would have like ways to group it and search for it, right? So you'd have your little online store and individuals could do it, other stores could do it. They were doing pretty well. But they were struggling with OKRs. They were doing it on a quarterly cadence, for example. And I talked to the CEO, and the CEO was like really about to give up on OKRs. Just, we're doing this. It's more of a compliance thing. We're just writing them through. I mean, it's not to say it's terrible, but we're not really getting any value out of this. And I said, well, okay, what is the big objective for this next cycle? And he said, well, actually, I mean, it's all about getting ready for this big event. I think it was like something like the something com or whatever, like some big conference, right? The annual conference that was going to be for all these trading card people. And that's where they're going to see, like, that's where they're going to get like half of their business for the year at this one conference. So I said, okay, well, it sounds like the objective is to make that, conference a success. And he said, no, I want to make it and I forget what word he used, but like a wild success or a wild hit. He came up with something that was like, make it a magical experience or whatever.
Our
And I
big,
said,
very audacious goal for this,
yeah,
this
I
trading
want to,
conference.
that's the objective. And everybody could rally around it. We had a good why. We had a good why now, right? I mean, why is it important? Well, 50% of our business is going to come from but the problem was it was 8 months away. So it was like, well, wait, how can we write an OKR if it's 8 months away? We should do it every quarter. And I said, no, let's write an OKR that's 8 months away. Let's just do it, right? Let's say, like, let's actually go there and tell me what it looks like. How will we know the day after we get out of that conference, when we're home, how will we know that the conference was a success? And he said, Ben, you don't understand. We just know. I mean, we go there, we have this gut feeling that we know, we celebrate, we know if it's good or bad. And I said, okay, that's great. Thank you. But I'm not asking you if you can feel like that's not a measurable statement. Like, what are the things that we can point to? Suppose I just got there, I've been there for 2 weeks, and you're telling me we had a huge how do I know you're not just some leader saying you just feel good about the conference or something? And he said, well, there are some things that we track. And I said, okay, like what? And he said, well, there's the number of private demos with these types of prospects that we complete. There's the number. And I said, okay, wait, those are your key results. And he said, well, there's this one other thing. We want to launch this new product and we want to demo it there. And I said, okay, well, how would we know if you demo it there? How would we know it was a success? I went through all those questions. This guy was like totally on board with OKRs now because he's a CEO. He realized he doesn't want to just rely on how do we feel afterwards. I feel great and I'm the CEO, so therefore it was a success. What kind of a message does that send? What if you're in a bad mood? You might feel bad about it. So we came up with the OKRs and all of a sudden it was really clear. Like everybody in the organization knew exactly what we needed to do to achieve that. It's a small company, right? You can't say this for big companies. This was still a small enough company where I think like 35 employees. So the CEO said, here's the objective, here are the key results, and we could divide and conquer. And these guys completely blew this conference out. I mean, they usually say half our revenue they like got 2 times their annual expected sales within the first week after this conference. And it was a huge success. And they attributed it all to really nailing down the measurable statements to get really clear on what that looks like before go 8 months ahead of time, gave them plenty of time to prepare for that. So that's an interesting success story to me because they only had the one company level OKR. They all rallied around it. And with a company of 35 people, they can do that. Before, they were writing OKRs like all over the place. They were quarterly. So what we did was we focused them on one OKR and we made it 8 months based on an impending event. Right. I think the lesson that I learned there was if you have some big impending event, don't hesitate to write an OKR around that impending event time frame rather than saying, oh, well, we do them every quarter. This is not like a budgeting. This is not a compliance thing, which has rules that have to be strictly followed. You tune your OKRs program to what's happening in your business. I think that's the key takeaway there.
Yeah, fantastic. Very good. Okay, like the information about OKRs, the factors that can lead people astray that we may have encountered, some of the insights to make this better, being transparent, and we will look at your website for the deployment parameters, and I'll have the link to that in the show notes as well. As we've been talking about OKRs, this is an aspect of process. And when we talk about product mastery, this podcast is built around 7 knowledge areas. Process is one of those, or for my friends in Canada, process. I teach in Canada, so I have to make sure I say that. And we want to get our hands around all 7, though, if we are professionals. And I have a system for that. It's called the Rapid Product Mastery Experience, the RPM experience. It takes you through these 7 knowledge areas. These are not my knowledge areas per se. I built a system to help you understand them better and to learn them and apply them. But they come from research that PDMA has been doing for 50 years now. They're the International Association for Product Development and the Product Development Management Association, the Professional Association for Product Innovators and Product Managers. And if you're really serious about your career and you want to excel as a product manager or product leader, you need to get these under your belt. If you happen to be a product VP, this is a great way to enhance your team and get the team working better together. If you want to find out more about how this works and if it can help you, simply go to productmasterynow.com/RPM. So OKRs are part of that process and many more things there too. In addition to learning about OKRs today, we also like innovation quotes. I asked you to bring one for us and share what that means to you.
Yeah, so for me, I should just give you the context. I grew up with the grandchild of Peter Drucker. And at the time, I didn't know I was going to be kind of a management science guy and stuff. So I didn't really think it was a big deal. And then the more I learned about this family, the more I was like, wait a minute, wait, because I was friends with my friend's dad, who was the son of Peter Drucker. I'm like, your dad is like one of the main guys that like he invented the word management. I mean, this is a big deal. And he's like, yeah, we know, we know. But I got a lot of quotes from Peter Drucker. And one of my favorites is, if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. And I really like that. It's like a lot of people want something new, but yet they just are sitting there wanting it and they're doing what they're doing. You have to then stop doing something old. It's not about doing something just different. It's actually about stopping something that you're doing. Okay, so that's my favorite quote. And it's also like, let me just add this in there for those of you that do organizational psychology or business dynamics with organizations that are looking at change management, because I know you have a background in that too, Chad. I'm going to draw a line right down the middle. This is the Kurt Levine force field diagram. And what you want to think about is if you want to change, you want to make some innovation, you have forces trying to get you to change the things that you're doing that are new and different, but then you have all the things that you're doing that are not new and different. And the key to making that change, this is what the quote is saying, is pull away some of the things that are keeping you where you are. Like take away some negatives. So the classic example is if you want to stop smoking, there might be some reasons why you want to stop smoking, like, oh, I want to live longer and my parents are trying to make me stop or whatever. Well, okay, great. But there also might be, if you go to the bar, you see other people smoking and that's kind of making you smoke. So just take away that. Don't go to the bar. Remove that negative, right? Stop doing that. And then that's going to free you up and allow you to make that change. So I would take the Drucker quote and then I would marry it with the Kurt Levine force field change diagram. And if you can figure out what that all means, maybe that'll be inspirational or useful to you.
I like it very much. I think that's a very good combination, right? You have to stop doing something. You have to free up time to do the thing you want. But think about those barriers that are in place when it comes from a change management perspective that are holding you to that thing and making it hard for you to change, and work on them too. So that's a great quote and a nice connection to growing up with Drucker's grandkid. That was pretty cool. Fantastic. How can people find out about the work you're doing, resources? We did hear about your OKRs.com website.
Right. So I would go to www.okrs.com and browse around. I also have this book, and this is like a textbook from 2016 that I wrote with my buddy Paul Niven, who is an expert on the balanced scorecard. And I don't know that I would really recommend that book at this point. It really is not, it's more of a textbook if you really want to have it on your shelf, to be honest with you. The one that you want is, like I said earlier, the OKRs field book. So get that. And if you're going to implement OKRs, that has everything you need to know. I believe it has everything you need to know to get going. There's a final resource, which is maybe a little bit more advanced, but it's OKRs Coach Network, it's OKRscoach.network. So it'd be like www.okrscoach.network. And that's for those of you that have already read the field book and you want to be part of a community where we actually have a bunch of other coaches from around the world exchanging best practices and just creating a community. Because right now, I mean, the thing that's interesting about being an OKRs coach is there's really no actual OKRs coach framework that's legit. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the OKRs field book, is that I'm hoping that these certification of OKRs coach pop-up organizations that are giving you certifications will incorporate the ideas from this OKRs field book into their curriculum for certification. I myself do not offer a formal certification program, but I do offer this OKRs Coach Network, which is just a way to kind of connect and evolve. And you can totally, if you join, say, hey, I'm a member of the OKRs Coach Network, and we do support you because, hey, you might have a client in France, and you might be on an airplane, and you might be saying, wait a minute, I don't want to make those same mistakes. So we try to make sure that doesn't happen to you.
No, I love that. This last year, I was asked by an agency that actually is training. It turned out to be 123 innovation trainers, and most of them are already innovation trainers, and I was asked to help them get better at what they do. And they ask questions that I have not run into before, right?
Yes.
Wonderfully fun and stretches me. And same for you, right? When you are coaching OKR coaches,
It's so
right?
true.
you get better at your craft because you get exposed more quickly to things that you don't run into.
It's
that
right.
they're
It
running
keeps me
into.
sharp. It keeps me sharp and keeps me honest, because otherwise, if you're working with clients and you're doing pretty well, you're not getting challenged, things can get kind of stale. And for me, I've been doing this for 12 years. So the OKRs Coach Network, it really is a small community, and people that get involved with that, obviously some participate more than others, but it's a fun way for me to have colleagues, right? As opposed to just clients. Because I do, that was one of the reasons why I started the OKRs Coach Network, is just to make OKRs Coach friends from all around the world and hopefully build long-term relationships where we can help each other.
Yep. Yep. Fantastic. Good. Thanks for sharing the resources. I will make sure we have links in the show notes for that. Ben, just has been wonderful and very valuable talking with you, helping us to get a better handle on using OKRs, maybe some of the reasons they might not be working for us and things we should
Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah, we definitely did a good job of covering the very many reasons. And I mean, there probably are some that I missed, but I think we touched on a good 80% of them. So I'm really glad we were able to do that. And hopefully that resonates with a lot of you. So thanks again, Chad, for having me on the show.
Ben, really appreciate it. And for listeners, if you want to find the written article that we will produce along with this, simply go to productmasterynow.com/523. And once again, our podcast is in video version on YouTube by searching for Product Mastery Now there. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.